The crimson sun hung heavy over Clyrion's cracked horizon, tinting the metallic crystal valleys with copper and purple reflections. Each gust of wind carried a subtle chorus, as if the rocks themselves vibrated in harmony, and this mineral music mixed with the distant sound of plasma waves breaking against cliffs of liquid iron. Dante Vega stopped at the edge of a shimmering dune, the translucent mask filtering the thin, salty air, and looked toward the horizon. Beneath his explorer's cloak, his heart raced. He wouldn't admit it out loud, but every step on Clyrion reminded him that humans were still newcomers on the galactic stage. And yet, something deep inside whispered that this place wasn't completely unfamiliar. Behind him, a tall, slender figure emerged from the bluish mist. Selrin, an Avari scientist, moved with the lightness of someone who belonged to the landscape. Her violet skin reflected the crimson sun in subtle glints, and her eyes, two lilac suns, seemed to see invisible patterns in the wind and rock. Her hair, nearly black with iridescent strands, was tied in long braids, brushing lightly against the plates of her biotextile armor. With a slight motion, she activated the quantum scanner mounted on her wrist. The device sang in high frequencies like a metallic bird. "You went the wrong way again, human," she said lightly, her voice a melodic whisper like water running over smooth stones. "I swear your species' sense of direction defies statistics." Dante smiled behind the visor. "You like this?" His deep, rough voice came through the comm. "You like watching me screw up so you can shine with your intergalactic wisdom." Selrin raised a delicate brow, a gesture she'd picked up from him after months of traveling together. "I won't deny it. But the signal's intensifying. If you keep going west, you'll lose the energy convergence." Dante adjusted the magnetic rifle on his back, more for something to do with his hands than actual need. "And what if I just wanted to watch more of the sunset? Clyrion's beautiful in its own way." He left the line hanging, knowing she'd pick up the subtext. Selrin ignored the hint or pretended to. Her fingers danced across the scanner display. "Whatever's buried here, Dante, it isn't just another relic. It's an artifact older than any record from the 11 catalogued civilizations in this quadrant." Dante exhaled, the cold air crystals fogging his visor. Working for the Archaeo-Cosmic Order had its glamorous side, exploring forbidden worlds, scientific breakthroughs, advanced tech. But it also meant getting into places where one mistake could vaporize him into the vacuum. He looked at Selrin, her scanner glowing green. For an instant, the contrast between her violet skin and the crimson sun did something strange to his perception, as if two distinct stories were about to intersect. 3 months tracking this signal," he said, descending the dune. "You know what that does to a human stuck in hostile environments? Improves cardiovascular conditioning?" Selrin shot back with a little smile. Dante chuckled once. "I'll give you that one." They moved side by side. Each step made the crystals beneath their boots emit high-pitched tones, like glass notes. The scanner vibrated faster, and a metallic smell flooded the air, like ozone after a lightning strike. Selrin raised her hand for silence. The landscape opened onto a plateau of black rock, polished like liquid obsidian. In the center, a spiral of monoliths rose to the sky like petrified fingers. "This is ground zero," she murmured. "The energy echo is here." Dante turned slowly, taking in the view. The monoliths didn't look natural. Their angles were too perfect, and runes etched across them resembled living circuits. A deep hum reverberated through the air, crawling into his bones. He looked at Selrin. "How many worlds have you seen with something like this?" "None," she said, eyes fixed on the runes, "not in the Avari databases, not in the Order's simulations." Something in Dante's chest tightened. He was an archaeologist, but also a former Terran Forces pilot. He knew when they'd crossed into territory too unknown for protocols, yet at the same time there was a strange familiarity, like hearing an ancient song without knowing where you first heard it. Selrin approached the central monolith. The energy's strong. It's in a cyclic pattern, almost breathing. She glanced back at him over her shoulder. Don't touch. He stepped closer anyway, drawn by the glow of the runes. Don't touch is always the most tempting invitation, you know. Dante, her tone was warning, not scolding. This place isn't just old, it's before. But he was already inches from the stone. The surface was smooth and cold, like metallic ice. The hum grew louder, matching his heartbeat. By reflex, Dante pulled off his right glove. The freezing air bit at his skin. The touch happened almost without thought. The whole ground vibrated. Crystals around them began to glow, forming spiral patterns. Selrin stepped back, eyes widening. What did you do? Dante didn't know. He just felt it. A wave shot through his body, like a gigantic ancient memory slotting into his DNA. Suddenly, he saw flashes. Human ships crossing nebulae, gates of light, battles against creatures defying geometry. He staggered, breathing hard. Selrin ran to him, grabbing his shoulders. Talk to me. What did you see? He blinked, heart hammering. I don't know, but I think someone or something just recognized me. The central monolith opened, revealing a triangular pedestal with an object embedded, a crystalline blade with a metallic hilt pulsing deep blue. With each beat of Dante's heart, the sword responded. Selrin was speechless. That shouldn't be here. He reached for it. Dante, wait! But the sound of the crystals was now a chorus. The blade pulsed harder. The air turned thick and vibrant, smelling of plasma and iron. Dante felt an almost living magnetic force pulling him. When his fingers touched the hilt, the sword exploded in white light. The pulse raced outward for miles, shooting into orbit like a beacon. Selrin dropped to her knees, shielding her eyes. Dante heard a sound inside his mind, not a voice, but a summons. He lifted the sword. For the first time it was out of the pedestal, light as if it had always been his. A blue aura expanded around them, sketching runes in the air. Selrin raised her head, her expression a mix of fear and awe. This is going to bring everyone here. Dante looked down at the blade, vibrating with his heartbeat. I think that's exactly what it wanted. A shadow moved above, in the stratosphere. Signals flashed across Selrin's visor. Order of archaeo-cosmic codes, containment protocols, incursion alerts, and in the middle of it all, the sword began projecting a three-dimensional map of light, lines tracing routes far beyond Clerion. Selrin stood slowly, stepping closer. This isn't just a weapon, Dante. It's an invitation. He looked at her, the blade reflecting them both like a mirror. Then let's find out where it leads. And as the skies of Clerion began to fill with ships rushing to investigate the energy burst, Dante Vega and Selrin looked at each other, knowing the sword's touch had just tied their fates together. The first flash was still streaking through the atmosphere like a comet when the second pulse from the Lumina blade swept across Clerion from east to west, igniting phosphor veins in the underground crystals as if the planet's crust itself were breathing light. Dante tightened his grip on the hilt. It wasn't cold metal, but something warm and vibrating, almost a taut cord strung between his heart and an invisible field. Around them, the spiral of monoliths modulated a deep chorus. Fine particles rose from the ground, forming a halo, and for a brief instant, the kind that changes destinies, Dante saw the map hovering again in mid-air. Blue lines, luminous nodes, a route leaving Clerion to plunge into a region of space marked by red vortices. Maelstrom. The word didn't come through translation. It arrived whole, with the scent of ozone and storm salt. "Dante!" Selrin's voice cut through the trance, sweet and urgent at once. "Order blockade ships inbound. 2 containment vessels and—" Her eyes flicked across her visor's readouts. "A private signature, mercenaries." The comm cracked in both their ears. "Field Team K7, confirmed status. We detected a high-order photonic detonation. Withdraw and surrender the artifact for quarantine." A flat, faceless voice Dante knew too well. Procedures, forms, golden chains. He drew a long breath, anchoring the blade's pulse to the rhythm of his chest. "If I say it's just a new flashlight, you think they'll believe me?" Selrin didn't smile. The blue glow of the hologram painted liquid constellations across her face. "The Order isn't here to listen, they're here to contain. And the private signature." She tapped her earpiece, filtering noise. "Grey hunters, they buy by the kilo, sell by the system." Above, the sky began to freckle. Jump points, re-entry trails. The luminous dust of the crystals rose with the pressure. Dante pivoted slightly, instincts searching for an exit. That's when he realized something that hadn't happened yet during this insane day. The blade, light, moved with him. The edge tilted like a pin over a map, and the beam inside, not a beam, but a living line, pointed toward the edge of the plateau, where the liquid obsidian dropped into a maze of fissures. "This way," he said, not knowing where the certainty came from. "You're leaving a light trail the entire planet can see," Selrin shot back, but she was already at his side, tightening the strap of her case with efficient gestures. Her touch brushed his bare forearm. An electric shiver rose, something between static discharge and the memory of holding hands in the rain. "Your heartbeat's spiking," she said, in a tone too professional for the gleam in her eyes. "Breathe from the diaphragm." "I'm breathing with the galaxy," he replied, and for once it wasn't bravado. They descended the edge of the plateau in a zigzag, crystals singing glass notes beneath their boots. Overhead, a scanning beam swept the monoliths, pouring white light like a silent waterfall. Order containment mechanisms designed to freeze what they don't understand. Dante felt the flash trying to bite at the blade's halo, and recoiling. There was a snap in the air like magnets repelling. "Lumina's rejecting capture," Selrin murmured, impressed despite the danger. "It won't let itself be stored." "Neither do I," Dante said, wiping cold sweat from his neck with the inside of his glove. "And neither do you." The fissure swallowed them. Beneath the plateau, Clyrion's walls dropped at impossible angles, reflecting the blade's light across millions of planes like the floor of a diamond ocean. The sound outside became a distant metallic beat. Down here, the world had the acoustics of a cathedral. Selrin touched the rock with her fingertips. Silver filaments sprouted from her skin, probing microfissures, and the scanner on her wrist trilled with satisfaction. "There are ancient vehicle tunnels," she said, "not the Order's. Pre-order. The energy in them pulses in phase with your blade. If we call that coincidence, math resigns." Dante raised the lumina. The blade bent the beam slightly to the right, like a compass needle finding north. The path narrowed. At one point he had to turn sideways, the metal of his pack scraping against crystals that gave off a faint, off-key tone. Selrin came right behind, so close her breath touched the back of his neck, and for a stolen instant out of time, the war and the Order and the hunters ceased to exist. Only the two of them and the blue light carving a corridor through the mineral night. "K7, you are not authorized to descend unmapped structures." The voice on the comm returned sharper. "Last warning. Surrender the artifact, block transmissions, and await escort." "I hate it when they say surrender like they're asking for a hug," Dante muttered, cutting the audio. "And when the artifact has a will of its own, who exactly am I surrendering it to?" Selrin tilted her head, studying him. "You've already decided. You just haven't told me yet." Dante wanted to answer with irony, but the truth came out clean. The map showed a world of storms. The route jumped into my head like a memory. The blade wants to go. I want to go. Selrin nodded, not surprised. My people say great instruments choose their musicians, and great journeys choose their travelers. She laid her hand on his chest, exactly where his heart kept time. Lumina synced here. I'm just following the physics. And I'm following you, he said before he could stop himself. She withdrew her hand slowly, like putting away something fragile. Then let's save first the body that carries that heart. Do you hear it? She pointed upward. Dante heard. Vibrations. Not wind, thrusters. The maze ended in a vast, low chamber, ceiling full of mirrors so the blade's light became cascading constellations. There was an opening to the surface on the far side, an old tunnel mouth with edges gnawed by time. And parked under the opening, the sleek shape of a lightship camouflaged in crystal plating, short wings, minimal tail, cargo belly, Selrin's signature, all aesthetics and function. It's the Vesperal Siren, she said, a touch of pride. I blocked thermal emissions, unless they smell my perfume. I smelled it the first day, Dante said, and for a second her look admitted what they both pretended to hide. A flare poured through the opening, and with it the jagged shadow of a grey hunter descending on a hoist. The hull, built from polished scrap and braided bones, or something that looked like bones, bore marks of past victories. Painted kill tallies, trophies Dante didn't want to identify. Machine guns spun, and the chamber vibrated with the promise of holes. They won't fire on me with the order nearby, Selrin gambled. They shoot at noise, Dante countered. Power up the Vesperal. I'll buy 5 seconds. What are you? But Dante was already moving. In the army they taught him courage is discipline applied when your body wants to break apart. He climbed onto a block of crystal, boots biting minimal traction, and pointed the Lumina toward the tunnel mouth. It was no use thinking sword. The Lumina didn't answer to words, but to intentions. So he thought of cutting wind, of opening clarity, of splitting silence. The blade sang. Not a sound of metal, but harmonics you feel in your skin first. An arc of dense photons cut through the air, struck the hoist line in a precise slash, and for an instant Dante swore he saw the geometry of the world retreat, give way, saying, "All right, you may pass." The suspension cable burst in sparks, and the Grey's module fell back outside, slamming against the main hull with a crash any language translates as "ouch." "Dante!" Selrin shouted, already running toward the Vesperal's ramp, the ship waking beneath their feet with an elegant growl. 2 order drones coming in from the flank. Field stabilizers." The ground shook. A translucent aura descended through the opening like a curtain of hard water. When it touched the rubble, it solidified the dust mid-air. Dante felt the field trying to immobilize the Lumina. An invisible elastic web. The sword answered with a low-timbered pulse, and the field's fibers trembled like out-of-tune strings. Cracks formed in the light. He didn't have to beat the field, he only had to tune it. "Come on!" Selrin yelled from the ramp, arm extended. Dante ran. 2 steps, 3, leap. His hand found hers with a precision that would make an astro-navigator jealous. For 1 whole second, a cubic second, a second large enough to hold worlds, Selrin's palm pressed to his, channeled a searing current, rising up his arm, through the Lumina's hilt and fanning outward. The Order's curtain shattered into mosaics, each fragment carrying a tiny reflection of their faces. "Co-pilot," Selrin said, pulling him inside. "Belt, lock, breathe." The sequence came out automatic, professional, but her voice carried laughter at the edges. "And don't crash my ship." "I only crash what deserves it," Dante replied, strapping in. The Vesperal's cockpit was a snug nest, dark panels with deep-sea light icons. Under the console, a crystal pendant swung gently, a keepsake from Selrin's homeworld. He set the Lumina into the improvised magnetic cradle between their seats. The blade didn't snap in. It settled, like an animal choosing to lie near someone. The cavern mouth shrank behind them. Outside, Clerion was once again a sea of mirrors, except for what had changed. Streaks of ships cutting the sky, 2 white Order drones aligned to block, the Grey's crocodile hull prepping another hoist. "If we take off straight, we're target practice," Dante said. "Then let's dance," Selrin whispered, her fingers on the stick with the grace of someone playing an instrument she'd built herself. The Vesperal bit the air at an angle forbidden by manuals, scraping its belly across the crystals, a hoarse chord, but nothing a nanobath couldn't fix, spinning between the 2 drones in an S, so tight Dante saw, reflected on the hull, the serial number of 1 Order stabilizer. The second drone tried to throw a shear field. Selrin released micro-vortices from the right wing, muddying the flow and tangling the shear like wet cloth. "Still think this isn't music?" she asked, a short laugh lighting her eyes. "Did I ever say that?" Dante replied, oblivious to the blood drumming in his temples. The hull vibrated. The Greys had chosen the universal language of projectiles. A line of kinetic rounds scored above the canopy, another chewed at the left wing. Alarms popped, but the Vesperal kept speaking, purring a reply. Dante turned his chair half a foot, his hand sliding from the armrest to the Lumina's hilt. The blade pulsed before he even asked. It knew. "Feel like doing something irresponsible," he said. "I was born in an electric storm," Selrin shot back. "Define irresponsible." "Open the Grey's channel." She blinked, but complied. Dante dropped his tone, letting his voice come from the diaphragm as she taught him. "To whoever's up there, you've targeted the wrong museum. Back off now and live to brag in another bar." Silence for 2 heartbeats. Then a guttural voice, full of teeth. "Hand over the blade, singing human, and you get the whole bar." Dante looked at Selrin. "They called me a singer." "Don't go off key," she said. "Negative," Dante answered on the channel. "We're singing in another frequency." He cut the transmission. Selrin understood before asking, "Nosedive." The Vesperal dropped between 2 crystal columns like a swallow through barbed wire, scraping sparks. Dante, beside her, raised the Lumina diagonally, and the blade, as if it were a violin bow, stroked the air. The wave came out with no visible light, just a pressure sensation rounding the ears. Above, the Grey's hoist seized, joints locked by microcavitation of the field, and toppled like a badly thrown anchor. The black hull cursed with pops. The cavern replied with a rain of sparks. "Atmospheric jump," Selrin announced. "Hold on!" The Vesperal tilted toward the crimson sun. Layers of thin air passed like film strips. Tremor gave way to loud silence. On radar, the drones shrank, the Greys smaller still. Above, the fat shadow of the Order's blockade moved to intercept. And it was there, in that thin space between danger behind and danger ahead, that the Lumina projected the map again, now expanded in the cockpit. Nodes like jewels, lines like rivers, and at the center of it all, Maelstrom. A red vortex folded in triple spiral. Dante felt certainty enter his bones, like the first sip of water after a desert. "That's where!" Selrin followed it with her eyes, pupils widening. "That's sectors off regular charts, mutable routes, plasma winds, particle lightning. And stories. Stories of things that don't belong to common geometry." She placed her hand over his on the armrest. A brief touch, but complete. "I'm going with you." Dante tilted his head, almost laughing at the absurdity of asking, as if there were a universe where he'd go without her. Then let's go, before the order updates the manual. Selrin blinked a command sequence. The Vesperal's warp drive sang in the low register of ancient Wales, a necklace of ignition points lighting under the fuselage. At the prow, space began to wrinkle, first like heat over asphalt, then like a sheet rolled by invisible hands. A yellow warning bit the panel's edge, administrative warp block. Order. Selrin smiled with one side of her mouth, the smile of someone who cheats equations. They can block authorization, not physics. The warp opened like water parting, and before crossing, Dante took one last look at shrinking Clerion. Monoliths, spirals, mineral music. Everything seemed to answer, a farewell that wasn't goodbye, but go. The Vesperal dove into the corridor of light. Behind them, drones, hunters, procedures. Ahead, the distant rumor of a world wrapped in storms, and a secret the Lumina was pushing like an ancient door. And in between, two navigators who already knew. The journey had chosen them. The warp opened like a torn petal. The Vesperal emerged into deep space with a shudder, shields crackling as they adjusted to the differential pressure. Ahead, the void was neither dark nor silent. A cosmic cyclone filled the entire view, a planet wrapped in giant swirls of red and blue gas, particle lightning dancing in concentric waves. This was Maelstrom, the storm world. A name so old, it no longer appeared on official maps, only in footnotes erased by the Order. Dante pressed his face to the canopy glass, and for an instant, the reflection of the lightning in his eye merged with the blue glow of the Lumina blade resting between them. The planet looked alive, breathing, each exhale moving plasma currents the size of continents. To his left, Selrin's fingers danced across the panel screens, generating holograms of the magnetic field. The flux lines swirled like snakes in a trance. "This isn't weather, it's engineering," she said, her voice almost reverent. "Every hurricane is mathematically in harmony with the next. This pattern is a quantum signature." Dante looked at her. "You're saying someone built this?" "Not someone. Many." Her violet eyes caught a flash of lightning. "The Avari have legends about a first empire, but I never imagined it would be literally true." He tightened his hand on the Lumina's hilt. The blade pulsed stronger than it had on Clerion, like an animal scenting home. "The sword wants to go in." Selrin tilted her head. "The entire planet is a wall. Every particle of those storms is semi-plasmatic. No ship trying to breach lasts more than seconds." "Then we have to do it her way." Dante raised the Lumina. "Will you help me?" Selrin gave a sideways smile, one that said, "I was waiting for this. I was just waiting for you to ask." The Vesperal rolled on its axis and advanced. Maelstrom's outer layers were a carpet of charged particles, and the first touch lit the ship's shields with turquoise light. On the panel, graphs spiked to absurd peaks. Selrin cursed in her own language, a guttural snap full of liquid consonants, and ran a hand across her chest as if soothing a wild animal. "Maximum stability in 30 seconds or we lose the hull," she warned. "No pressure," Dante replied, but his body was hot, pulsing to the same rhythm as the blade. Each electric discharge outside the canopy seemed to match an impulse inside his chest. He raised the Lumina, letting it hover in the cabin. The blade extended a strand of light until it touched the panel, like a conductive wire. The field around the ship changed frequency. The engine's rumble dropped to a deep bass that vibrated in their stomachs. Selrin glanced sideways, astonished. "You're synchronizing the shield with—" She stopped, closed her eyes and extended her hands, channeling her own biocurrent. Silvery filaments streamed from her fingertips into the Lumina's blue halo. The entire cockpit became saturated with a soft, almost liquid energy. "Focus with me," she said. "Think passage, not force. Think of air opening, not of punching." Dante followed her lead. He took a deep breath. In his mind, he saw the storms as silk threads, not walls. The lumina's pulse slowed, then restarted calmer like a giant metronome. A blue beam left the sword's tip, passed through the canopy, and traced a corridor in space. An unstable wound in the cyclone. The Vesperal followed the trail, diving. At the first impact, alarms screamed, but instead of shattering, the shield rippled like a bubble, absorbing the force. Lightning slashed beside the ship, so close Dante smelled ozone inside his helmet. Selrin kept her hands outstretched, her whole body glowing as if internal light escaped through her skin. Sweat ran down her neck, glimmering violet. "Keep going," she murmured. "Keep going, human." Dante locked on the corridor of blue light. Every second was an eternity. All of Maelstrom spun in whirlwinds, but inside that corridor the ship moved as if following a river of liquid glass. Outside, titans of plasma roared, trading city-sized bolts. Inside, dense silence and the synchronized beat of 2 hearts and 1 sword. "Deeper," Selrin said, her voice breaking. "The core is near." She blinked, surprised. "I can feel it." And then lower, "I can feel you." Dante turned his head and saw her eyes glowing blue instead of lilac. A shiver ran through him, not of fear, but of recognition. "I feel you too." The corridor ended in a point that was neither surface nor sky, a veil. Beyond it, nothing. Selrin swallowed. "This barrier, it's the last seal." Dante raised the lumina. The blade vibrated so fast it looked liquid. Together, she placed her hand over his, covering the hilt. Always. The touch triggered it. The lumina fired a white beam, not blue, expanding like petals. The barrier dissolved into fractals, revealing an opening into Maelstrom's lower stratosphere. The Vesperal slipped through, diving into an impossible calm. Below sprawled a hidden world. Towers and bridges of silvery material rising from fluorescent seas. Translucent domes with geometric patterns shifting as if breathing. Aerial roads of suspended particles, all illuminated by an inner sun, a sphere hanging at the planet's center, radiating soft blue light. Selrin raised her hand to her mouth. "This is impossible." Dante set his hand on the panel as if touching a giant sleeping animal. Not impossible, ancient. The Vesperal followed a gravitational flow to a platform suspended above a self-lit lake. Panels opened on their own like petals welcoming bees. Navigation instruments went wild. Alternate maps, coordinates that didn't exist in records, a direct signal to Dante's DNA. It was as if the planet itself was saying, "Welcome." "They knew someone would come back," Selrin murmured. Dante closed his eyes for a moment. The storm noise above now sounded distant, almost like a memory. In that blue silence, he felt a new weight, not the sword's burden, but the history it carried. The lumina, resting between them, pulsed slowly, like a heart after a run. He looked at Selrin. "Ready to see what's beyond?" She took a deep breath, trying to sound scientific, but her voice came out low. "I always wanted to be an archaeologist, to find a living ruin. Never thought I'd find an entire civilization hidden in a planet's core." The panel projected a hologram of the whole city. Ancient runes began forming in the air, linking to the sword's markings. Dante realized it wasn't just translation, it was an activation code. Selrin slid a finger along the projection. "The lines lead to a sanctuary of the Guardians." She looked at him. "I think the blade wants to take us there." Dante leaned toward the lumina, its blade glowing softly. "Then that's where we'll go." Far above, sensors invisible to the naked eye picked up the breach in the shield. Waves of communication rippled through space. On the perimeter, mercenary ships and order drones turned their antennas. One by one, faceless eyes realized something had crossed the impossible. But inside the storm world, Dante Vega and Selrin had already descended into a place where neither laws nor common legends reached. The planet's walls were both fortress and womb. And in the heart of that womb, something waited, something recognizing not just a human or an alien, but the two of them together. The Vesperal touched down softly on the suspended platform, its wings folding inward like tired limbs after a long run. Beneath the hull, the fluorescent water looked both liquid and solid at once, forming spiral patterns that reacted to the ship's weight. Dante shut down the engines and for a moment heard only the sound of his own blood in his ears. The world around them was impossibly silent, not an absence of noise, but a submerged harmony, as if the entire city were breathing in one sustained note. Selrin was already on her feet, violet skin lit by blue reflections as she adjusted the quantum scanner at her wrist. The device wouldn't stop signaling. Energy spikes, partial translations of a forgotten language, readings impossible for any modern database. She glanced at Dante. This place, it's more than a shelter. It's a living system. Everything responds to the sword. He picked up the lumina, now dimmer, as if it were resting. When he raised the hilt, a beam projected automatically out of the ship, tracing a glowing path on the ground that snaked toward a monumental doorway flanked by silver columns. The gesture was so natural, Dante almost laughed. It's the most advanced tourist map in the universe. Selrin gave a faint smile, but didn't take her eyes off the projection. It's choosing the path. Then lower, and we're the first to set foot here since who knows when. They walked down the ramp. The air was cool and soft, smelling of ozone and storm salt, but loaded with ions that made their skin prickle. The ground beneath their boots felt like stone, and at the same time like solidified water. Each step left trails of light that faded slowly, like fire marks. The city rose in domes and braided towers, no seams visible anywhere, as if it had grown rather than been built. The luminous sphere at the planet's core, suspended above like an inner sun, sent gentle flashes that pulsed in rhythm with the sword. As they neared the doorway, its smooth surface began fracturing into fractals, opening into a wide corridor lit by bands of blue energy. Selrin's scanner went wild. The material is pre-crystalline, doesn't exist on the periodic table. She ran her fingers through the air, brushing a floating panel that reacted with musical notes. This is a living language. Dante stepped in right behind her. The corridor sloped downward in a slow curve, its walls covered in symbols that changed as they passed, telling stories in a sequence of light and sound. Images of human ships crossing nebulae, suspended cities, alliances between species. A narrative emerged, humanity not as newcomers, but as founders of a cosmic system. "We were guardians," Dante murmured, absorbing the fragments. "Not explorers, not conquerors. Guardians." Selrin touched an inscription showing two beings, a stylized human and an unknown alien, holding hands under an arch of light. "And we weren't alone," she added softly. "Always with others." The walls ended in a vast circular atrium. In its center, a low pedestal held a crystalline star-shaped structure with 12 points, each suspended in the air like petals of frozen glass. The floor around it was engraved with runes mirroring those on the lumina, forming a perfect mandala. As soon as Dante entered, the sword pulsed hard, and the petals began to spin slowly. Selrin stepped forward, scanner trembling on her wrist. "This is the Guardian's sanctuary," she whispered. "The core of the network, the heart of this world." Dante raised the lumina. Blue light climbed up the blade, merging with the crystal at the pedestal. A hologram sprang up above them. The entire galaxy in miniature, dotted with hundreds of blue lights, each one corresponding to a heart scattered across the cosmos. Lines connected the points into a web. At its center, an ancient human symbol, not of Earth, but something far older. Selrin lifted her hand, touching one of the light lines. This isn't just a map. It's an activation program. Dante felt the sword's pulse synchronize with his heartbeat. A stream of images surged through his mind. Humans in impossible armor, aliens wielding light weapons alongside them, giant ships departing to confront something without shape. He saw their fall, their silence, the storms raised as walls to guard the last bastions, and then a long void until someone ages later found the key. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. Selrin knelt beside him, her cool hand on the back of his neck. "Talk to me. What are you seeing?" "We built this," he said, not realizing he'd used "we." "Not just humans, but humans and others. The network is a promise. It's waiting for..." He drew a deep breath, like surfacing from a dive. "For us both." The crystalline structure began to glow brighter, responding not only to the lumina, but also to Selrin's touch. Filaments of energy rose from the pedestal, climbing her arm like temporary tattoos of light and meeting the hilt Dante held. For a moment, a bridge of pure energy linked them, and the whole floor vibrated. Selrin's eyes went wide. "It's like it's reading us." "It's not reading, it's confirming," Dante said. "Human DNA and a connection with another species. That's what it needed." The galaxy hologram expanded, now showing beyond the lights dark shadows seeping into the map's edges. Selrin recognized the pattern instantly, ruptures in the fabric of space, the same anomalies the Order had studied for decades. "The void entities," she murmured. "They're coming back." Dante shut his eyes, gripping the lumina tighter. "And the network is the only real defense." Outside the sanctuary, invisible sensors detected the activity. The sphere of light at the planet's center altered its pattern, sending a pulse toward orbit. Above, mercenary ships and drones began converging on the exact point where Dante and Selrin stood. Secrecy was over. Inside the atrium, the crystal pedestal projected a new image, a circle with two central points linked by a beam, a stylized representation of Dante and Selrin. An ancient voice, not sound but vibration, filled the air. "Dual key confirmed. The last fleet awaits awakening. Prepare the link." Selrin looked at Dante, her eyes shining brighter than ever. "Link?" He swallowed hard. "I think we're about to find out." They rose side by side. The lumina, lifted between them, projected not just light, but a palpable field of energy dancing across their skin. Selrin reached out, touching the hilt along with him. The temperature dropped a few degrees. The pedestal opened into descending steps, revealing a tunnel going even deeper, a soft glow rising from below like an inverted aurora. "The sleeping fleet must be down there," she breathed. "The Guardian Arsenal." "Or something else," Dante replied, but he was already taking the first step. They began their descent. The walls changed color as they went, blue, then white, then gold. The air grew denser, sweeter. Selrin felt her own body vibrate in harmony with the field. Dante noticed Lumina's markings, appearing faintly on his arm, as if something were tattooing his history into his skin. The tunnel ended at a glass platform suspended over an impossible hangar. Rows of massive ships stretched to the subterranean horizon, some with silver hulls, others black as obsidian, all with design lines so ancient they resembled art. Each ship bore, at its prow, the same symbol as the Lumina, now dormant. Selrin let out a sound that was half laughter, half sob. "It's the last fleet, sleeping for millennia." Dante gazed at the Lumina. its blue glow reflected on the hulls like in mirrors. It's not just sleeping, it's waiting. Above the domed ceiling, runes began lighting one by one, keeping pace with their heartbeats. The entire hangar seemed to breathe. Selrin touched Dante's arm. "Do you realize? Everything is responding to both of us, not just you, not just the sword." He looked at her, a slow smile forming despite the weight of the moment. "Maybe that's how you activate it. Together." The Lumina pulsed one last time, and the platform they stood on began moving forward slowly, carrying them over the ships as if presenting the slumbering guardians to their new heirs. Above, echoes of hostile communications lagged behind the shield. But here inside, there was only the sound of something far greater awakening. The platform's slow movement stopped at a point suspended over the hangar. Below them, rows of sleeping ships stretched like an army of metal whales at the bottom of a blue ocean. Each hull bore different inscriptions, but all shared the same rune, a symbol of two intertwined spirals engraved on the prow. The air had the weight of a basilica, saturated with ions, smelling of ozone and something sweet Dante couldn't identify. It was like breathing lightning filtered through flowers. Selrin raised the scanner to capture everything, but the display went white, unable to process the density of data. It's like trying to measure infinity with a ruler," she whispered. Dante ran his free hand along the translucent railing. The surface vibrated under his touch, emitting a deep chord. The Lumina blade responded, lighting symbols that raced from the hilt to the blade. The sound rolled through the hangar like restrained thunder. One by one, the ships below awakened small internal lights, as if opening their eyes. "They're waking up," Selrin said, her voice a reverent whisper. "And they're responding to us." Dante looked at her, taking in the scene. "Not just to me, to us both." He raised the Lumina and added, "This is the link." The hologram above the crystal pedestal projected again, but now it wasn't only the galaxy with its sleeping hearts. Thick shadows began creeping across the map's edges, black stains with vibrating borders that defied normal geometry. The very air in the room seemed to chill. Selrin tapped at the scanner's display, but the device only emitted a low hum. "They're ruptures in the fabric of space," she murmured. "The same anomalies we studied in the Order, but massive." Images formed in Dante's mind, not before his eyes. He saw fragments of a remote past, battles where living lights faced liquid darkness, humans and aliens fighting side by side, a war so ancient it had vanished even from legend. He saw the fall, too, the last fleet retreating, the temple planets raising storm shields, the promise of return. Selrin felt the surge of information moving through him. She touched his arm, her violet skin prickling. "Talk to me. What are you seeing?" "They're coming back," Dante said, his voice rough. "The void entities, whatever they are, they never died. They were only waiting." From the ceiling, a wave of energy ran through the runes, and the entire hangar lit up in dark tones like a photographic negative. A voice vibrated in both their skulls, not sound, but meaning. "Threat detected, network weakened, dual key required for counterattack." Selrin straightened, clutching the scanner to her chest. "The system knows the void is back. It's calling us to respond." But respond how?" Dante asked, though he already knew the answer. "The sleeping fleet." The platform moved again, carrying them to a circular console at the hangar's center. A panel rose with lines of energy running like veins. Dante brought the Lumina closer. Immediately, symbols appeared in the air, dancing in spirals. Selrin translated mentally, awakening protocol. "You really want to activate it?" she asked quietly. "If we do, we'll draw the attention not just of the void, but of the entire galaxy." "I think we already have," Dante replied, remembering the ships orbiting above the shield. The question is whether we'll let the enemy return without defense. Selrin stayed silent for a second, then extended her hand. Together, then. Dante set the lumina at the console's center. Selrin placed her hand over his. A column of blue energy rose, wrapping them like a pillar. The floor shook. The ships below began to emit deep sounds, like church organs warming up. On invisible panels, ancient systems restarted after millennia. But the void didn't wait. On the holographic map, the black stains moved fast, like predators scenting prey. Above the planet, the Vespral sensors detected a sudden temperature drop and a distortion in space. Selrin heard static interference over the comm, not radio, but reality tearing. "Dante," she whispered, "they're here." He lifted his eyes. The hangar's ceiling, once solid, became transparent. They saw the mantle of storms above them churning abnormally, whirlpools opening from within. At the center, a black tear began to form, larger than any ship. Lines of lightning shot outward like exposed nerves. Selrin squeezed his hand tighter. "The entities are using the fleet's signal as a beacon." "Then we have to invert it," Dante said, eyes fixed on the lumina. "Not a hunting beacon, but a beacon of unity." The lumina answered with a pulse. The console interpreted, projecting a field over the ships. They began to truly awaken. Energy shields, warp drives, weapon systems no one had ever seen. The runes on each hull lit up deep blue, turning the hangar into a sea of light. Selrin let out a nervous laugh. "I never thought I'd see an entire fleet waking up because of a handshake." "Me neither," Dante said. "But here we are." In the hologram above them, communication lines fired outward from the planet, searching for other hearts. Dante felt something inside his chest, open like a channel, a mental bridge connecting him not just to the ships, but to something larger. He saw flashes of other human-alien pairs scattered across the galaxy, each about to find its own sleeping heart. A network of living beacons, but the void entity was descending. Through the transparent dome, they saw a contorted shape, an amalgam of tentacles, spheres of shadow, and impossible angles that hurt the eye. The air inside the hangar trembled. The temperature dropped. His heart constricted. Selrin pressed her hand to her temple, feeling a pressure as if something were trying to get in. "It's probing our minds," she said, breathing hard. Dante pulled her close. "Stay with me. Focus on me." Their hands' touch, their closeness, made the lumina glow brighter, repelling the invasive sensation. The void doesn't understand this. It doesn't understand connection. The console reacted, projecting an arc of energy from floor to ceiling. The ships began to lift from their cradles, suspended by magnetic fields. One by one, the hulls turned toward the dome. For the first time in millennia, the last fleet's engines roared. Selrin looked at him. "It's beautiful." "It's war," Dante corrected, "but it's a different war." From the ceiling a voice vibrated. "Enemy detected. Partial network activated. Dual key, prepare transfer." Dante looked at Selrin, her skin glowing blue. "Ready?" She nodded without taking her eyes off the void forming above. "Always." He raised the lumina. She placed her hand over his. The hilt pulsed, projecting a column of light that pierced the dome and touched the clouds above. For the first time, the vortex reacted not as a storm, but as an antenna. The entire planet became a transmitter. In orbit, mercenary ships and order drones received a signal they couldn't ignore. A giant hologram showing the void tearing reality and the sleeping fleet awakening. A universal message beyond translation. "We are not your enemy. The enemy is here." Selrin felt hot tears in her eyes, not of fear, but of intensity. "You just summoned the entire galaxy." "Then let's give them a reason to stay," Dante said, gripping the sword. Above, the void entity unfurled into a black flower of tentacles, pushing through the rift. The last fleet raised its energy cannons, each ship emitting a deep tone like plasma trumpets. Dante felt the whole network flow through him like a current. Selrin channeled her own energy, acting as a filter so he wouldn't burn out. In the back of his mind, an ancient voice, perhaps human, perhaps something beyond, murmured, "Show the link. Show that you are more than power. Show that you are union." Dante drew a deep breath. This is it. Selrin closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to his. "We go together." The Lumina fired a blue beam of light that pierced the ceiling and struck the void. Not like a bolt, but like an outstretched hand. For a second, the entity hesitated, reacting to something it didn't understand. The last fleet seized the moment and formed an energy barrier around the planet, a luminous cocoon. Selrin opened her eyes. "We bought time." Dante nodded. "Time is all we need." The dome shuddered like a crystal lung. The last fleet, newly awakened, hovered above the subterranean hangar, forming a defensive arc. Each ship projected blue shields that interlaced like petals, creating a mosaic of energy over the planet. On the other side, the void entity writhed like a living stain of darkness, tentacles of anti-light pressing against the cocoon. Black lightning burst along the shield's edges, sending gravity ripples that shook the floor where Dante and Selrin stood. They remained at the center of the Guardian Sanctuary, hands joined on the Lumina, connected not only to each other, but to every ship above. Dante felt the network like an electric field on his skin, each breath synchronized with engines kilometers away. Selrin, eyes closed, channeled her bioplasmic energy to stabilize the flow. Between them, the sword was a living tuning fork, translating the impossible into pulses mortal bodies could bear. "Are you holding?" Dante asked, his voice rough. "I'm guiding," Selrin answered without opening her eyes. "Energy is like water. You push, I channel." On the pedestal's hologram, hundreds of other points began blinking, signals from distant places. Each point was a heart responding to Clarion's awakening. Dante saw human-alien pairs linking up on far-off worlds. A Terran girl with green hair joining hands with a crystal-skinned Anko. An old ex-pilot clasping the hand of an amphibious Thalvri. Each pair reactivating its own sanctuary. The network was waking. "They're answering," Selrin whispered, moved. "The entire galaxy." The floor trembled with another impact. The void entity had changed tactics. Tentacles of anti-light threaded into the shields like black roots, hunting for weak points. A sharp pain stabbed Dante's temple, not physical, but a mental pressure, as if an invisible hand tried to tear open his memories. He saw flashes of childhood, his first flight, things he'd never told anyone. Selrin sensed the strain. She opened her eyes and cupped his face in both hands, forcing him to look at her. "Stay here, with me." Her voice was a beacon. The void can only enter if you're alone. Dante drew a deep breath, anchoring himself in her touch. "Show me how." She pressed her forehead to his. An arc of energy leapt from the contact, wrapping them in a luminous halo. The Lumina's hilt absorbed the mental field, redirecting it into the network. The ships responded in unison, shields strengthening. The void recoiled for a heartbeat, like an animal burned by light. "See," Selrin murmured. "Its connection. It doesn't understand this." Dante smiled, exhausted, but recognizing the truth. "Then let's use it." He closed his eyes and let his mind flow into the network. Suddenly he wasn't in the sanctuary anymore, but in a vast blue expanse where each ship was a point of light and each point linked to another. He felt thousands of minds brush his, pilots, scientists, soldiers, aliens, all facing the same abyss, an overwhelming sense of we instead of I. Selrin slid in alongside him, her awareness moving over his like water over hot stone. They didn't need words. He saw through her eyes, childhood on a world of violet tides, first contact with humans, the strangeness and the curiosity. She saw through his. Nights in Terran hangars, Clyrian sky on his first mission, the moment the sword chose him. Not invasion, but fusion. At the core of that fusion, the lumina burned brighter. Runes formed in the air above the pedestal, shaping a phrase, "Unity is strength, strength is light." Dante and Selrin raised the sword together. A blue beam lanced through the ceiling, pierced the dome, and touched the ship's shield. Each hull received the pulse and relayed it to its neighbor until a concentric wave of energy formed. When the wave reached the void, it didn't explode. Instead, it expanded like music. The void hesitated, tentacles stilled, outlines unraveled. The hologram above them showed unreadable patterns, perhaps the enemy's code trying to pass the phenomenon. But Dante felt that, for the first time, the entity was experiencing something close to fear. Selrin managed a tired smile. "You turned the fleet into an orchestra." "You gave me the score," Dante replied. But victory wasn't assured. New tiers opened at the edges of space, and more anti-light tentacles advanced. The entity was calling reinforcements, or multiplying. Selrin squeezed his hand. "We need more than music. We need a strike." The lumina pulsed, answering her thought. The pedestal projected a new image, a floating crystal at Maelstrom's center, below the sanctuary, the harmonic core, source of the planet's energy. A caption appeared in runes, "Heart of Light, maximum amplification." Dante understood at once. If we take the lumina to the core, we can channel the entire network of hearts through the planet. Selrin nodded, but her expression sobered. "It's risky. It could consume us." "Then we go carefully," Dante said. "But we can't wait long." The pedestal opened a passage downward, an energy lift spiraling into the depths. Without hesitation, they stepped in, the lumina floating between them. The descent was silent, only the glow of runes lighting the way. It felt like diving into an inverted ocean, each meter colder and more charged. At the core, the sight stole their breath. A colossal sphere of liquid crystal turned in suspension over an abyss. Blue energy rays tied it to the walls like harp strings, plucked by invisible hands. Each string thrummed a note, forming an eternal chord. Maelstrom's heart. Selrin nearly cried. "It's too beautiful." Dante raised the lumina. The blade answered with something not sound, but vibration. "I think she agrees." They moved to a central platform. The floor recognized their steps, lighting symbols underfoot. The core opened a slit, forming a socket at its center, clearly meant to receive the sword. Selrin touched his shoulder. "Once it's in, there's no turning back." Dante met her gaze. "Then we go together." She set her hand over his on the lumina's hilt. "Always." In a synchronized motion, they seated the sword in the socket. The liquid crystal sphere reacted at once. It expanded, shifted color, and released a pulse that shot through the planet. In orbit, the ships felt the impact and aligned in perfect formation. The void halted its advance for a second, as if space itself held its breath. Giant runes flared on the core's walls, translating into something Dante felt more than read. Love and union are our weapon. The void cannot consume what it does not understand. Energy from the core poured into the lumina, and from the lumina into them. Dante felt intense heat, but not pain. It was like a tide of light rushing through his veins. Selrin gasped, but held firm, silvery filaments winding around the blade like roots. The sword's markings appeared on them both, tattoos of light climbing their arms, necks, up to their faces. In the hangar, the last fleet blazed like an entire constellation, each ship receiving the pulse and routing it into the shields. The void surged again, but found a barrier not of raw energy, but of resonance, an impossible pattern to break. It was like trying to cut a song. Selrin let out a disbelieving laugh. "It's working." "It's not over," Dante said. "We have to show what we are." He closed his eyes, letting his mind merge completely with the network. He felt Selrin do the same. Together, they projected not just strength, but memories, compassion, everything they were. The network answered with a final flare, a wave of light that passed through the void entity not like a blade, but like a stellar embrace. The creature screamed in silence, its form dissolving into millions of fragments of anti-light. The tears began to close. The hologram above the core showed black stains retreating beyond the limits of known space. Selrin wept with relief. "They're falling back." Dante drew a deep breath, the tattoos of light beginning to fade. For now, the final flare dissolved slowly, like an aurora fading into night. Above Maelstrom, the last fleet hovered in flawless formation, their hulls reverberating in deep tones. The rifts that had torn open space were sealed, leaving behind a clean, almost shy silence. It was as if the entire universe had held its breath for millennia and was now letting out a sigh. In the harmonic core, Dante and Selrin stood with their hands still on the lumina as the energy ebbed to tolerable levels. The bands of light covering their arms began to retract, like tattoos slipping back under the skin. They looked at each other and saw the same reflection. Eyes still blue, breathing synchronized, bodies exhausted, yet upright. They had passed through something few minds could withstand. "We did it," Selrin murmured, her voice hoarse. "The void has retreated." "For now," Dante said, but there was no cynicism in his tone, only reverence. "But I think we left a clear message." The core responded with a series of low notes. Giant runes lit up the walls, weaving a holographic narrative. Above, the hangar showed the fleet drifting gently, aligning like pieces of a cosmic puzzle. A figure projected into the air, not a physical being, but an avatar of light, vaguely human with ancient features. Its voice came not as sound, but as direct understanding. "Guardians confirmed. Network reactivated. New protocol available." Selrin narrowed her eyes. "Protocol?" Dante gripped the lumina's hilt more tightly. "Let's hear it." The projection shifted, showing images of other worlds, each with its own sleeping heart. Some were already beginning to glow, responding to Maelstrom's activation. At each point, pairs of humans and aliens stood side by side, touching smaller versions of the Lumina or equivalent artifacts. The message was clear. They were not alone. "They're others like us," Selrin whispered. "The entire galaxy filling with dual links." The avatar of light inclined its head in a solemn gesture. "The legacy of the Guardians is not power, but responsibility. It was not given to you to conquer, but to unite. You will choose the next steps." Dante felt information pouring into him. Navigation charts, codes to access each heart, instructions to synchronize the new fleets. But more than data, he felt memories. Humans and aliens building cities together, sharing technology, saving endangered species, and at the center of it all, a conviction. Love and collaboration as a living technology. Selrin touched his shoulder, breaking the trance. "You're seeing it too?" "I am." Dante took a deep breath. "It's a lot, but it's beautiful. We're part of something much bigger." They moved toward the core, now less incandescent and more crystalline. The sphere opened a second slit, revealing a small object suspended, a crystal the size of a hand, pulsing with soft blue light. Selrin reached out, hesitant. A gift. Dante nodded. Or a symbol. When she touched the crystal, a light wave rippled through the room. Her scanner registered impossible patterns. It's a harmonic transceiver, a portable link. With this we can call the network from anywhere. Dante smiled. A phone to talk to the heart of the universe. Selrin laughed, tired but genuine. Something like that. The sphere closed the slit, and the runes on the walls changed color from blue to gold. The avatar of light spoke again. The void has retreated, but was not destroyed. Balance requires vigilance. You are the first of a new order. Honor the link. The projection vanished, leaving only the deep sound of the ships above. Dante looked at Selrin. I think that's our cue. They rode the energy platform back up into the hangar. The sight made Dante stop. The entire last fleet stood at attention, each ship now alive with lines of light running along its hull. At the center, a larger ship with elegant lines and curved wings waited apart, its prow turned toward them. It looked like an ancestral creature recognizing its handlers. Selrin drew a breath. It's the primordial vessel, the flagship. The lumina emitted a soft tone. Dante understood without words. This was the ship built to be commanded by the dual link. A corridor of light opened from the pedestal to the primordial vessel's entrance. Selrin turned to him. Ready to take the helm of a legend. After what we just did down there, I don't think anything can surprise me anymore, Dante replied. They walked down the corridor of light. Inside the primordial vessel, they felt the difference immediately. No traditional cockpit, but a circular space with translucent panels and a central core where the lumina fit perfectly. It was a living extension of the sanctuary, designed to fuse mind, ship, and network. Dante placed the lumina in its slot. The ship responded with a pulse, panels lighting up like constellations. Selrin ran her hands across the holographic controls. The integration is total. We can pilot by thought and touch. Outside, the entire fleet adjusted formation, responding to the flagship. Above, the planetary shield stabilized, now not only protection, but also an antenna for the galactic network. A strong signal escaped the planet, crossing warp and real space, spreading the news. The Guardian's legacy had been reborn. Selrin looked at Dante. And now, he took a deep breath, now we show the galaxy this isn't a weapon, it's an invitation. In orbit, the mercenary ships and order drones that had once been hostile received the harmonic pulse. Their sensors flooded with impossible data, images of the void retreating, the fleet awakening, human-alien collaboration. One by one, they powered down weapons, uncertain, hypnotized by the scale of what they witnessed. Selrin projected a holographic transmission. They're all watching. Dante faced the camera, not like a politician, but simply, his voice carrying the echo of the core. We are not your enemies. We did not come to steal. We came to awaken. The void is not a myth. It's a living threat. The last fleet is not our property. It's our responsibility. And you don't need to be afraid. It only works when we're together. Silence on the transmission. Then a mercenary ship answered on an open channel. If that's true, teach us. Other voices followed. Order drones began relaying peaceful signals. The fleet that had surrounded Clerion now formed a ring of escort, guardians instead of jailers. Selrin's eyes glistened. They believed. Dante smiled. They didn't believe in me. They believed in what they saw. And then, more softly, in us. The primordial vessel projected a new hologram, not just the galaxy, but a sequence of distant points, each a heart waiting to be activated. The avatar of light flickered briefly. The initial link is proven. The path opens. Dante and Selrin exchanged a look. The Vesperal was history. The primordial vessel was future. And in between the two of them, not just as archaeologists or fugitives, but as heirs to a millennia-old promise. Selrin touched his shoulder. We're going to have to travel to each of those points. It's going to take years. A lifetime, Dante replied, and I can't imagine better company. She smiled, pressing her forehead to his. Neither can I. The entire fleet emitted a harmonic tone, like applause from the stars. Above, space was clear, but on the galactic horizon, signals of movement re-emerged, not only threats, but also new allies awakening. Dante realized the Guardian's legacy wasn't just to defeat the Void, but to build a living web of worlds, pairs, fleets, and hearts. He drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of the Lumina, and for the first time, he didn't feel like an intruder, but like someone at home. Selrin squeezed his hand, and together they looked at the map spread before them, not as lone explorers, but as the first link of a new era. The primordial vessel rose gently above Maelstrom's core, accompanied by the last fleet in a spiraling formation. The planet's crystalline towers, now fully activated, launched columns of light into space, quantum antennas announcing to the universe that the storm world had awakened. Each beam carried data, memories, and harmony, an impossible-to-censor or intercept wave. The galaxy was listening. Dante and Selrin stood at the center of the command chamber, hands joined over the Lumina seated in its receptacle. The ship's core pulsed to a rhythm identical to their hearts, and the translucent panels reflected not only technical readouts, but emotions encoded as energy patterns. It was like piloting a constellation with the touch of a thought. Selrin drew a deep breath, her violet eyes now tinged a permanent blue. We're linked to every ship. Every awakened heart is seeing us, hearing us, and feeling us. Dante looked at her, taking in the weight of the moment. Then let's say something worth hearing. Selrin projected a galactic hologram above them. Dozens of points were already active, and many more pulsed on the verge of waking. Voices from different species began to arrive in waves, messages of gratitude, of perplexity, of doubt. But at the center was a strand of hope growing by the second. They want instruction, Selrin said, sliding her fingers across the map. They want to know how to activate the remaining hearts. Dante nodded. Then we teach. He inhaled and spoke to the entire network, his voice echoing across quantum channels. A guardian isn't a title, it's an act. It isn't possession, it's care. Each heart needs two. One human and one non-human, equals, bound not by war, but by trust. That's what awakens the technology, not commands, not weapons. And the transmissions replicated in multiple languages. Images appeared, humans reaching out to aliens on distant stations, scientists opening forgotten temples on orbital moons, former rivals joining forces. The entire network was becoming a living organism. But Dante didn't ignore the risks. In the hologram, dark stains still moved at the galaxy's edge. Not immediate attacks, but reminders that the Void hadn't been destroyed, only contained. He met Selrin's gaze. We still have work to do. She nodded steady, and we can't do it alone. The primordial vessel tilted, prepping its warp engines. The other ships aligned like luminous schools of fish. The avatar of light reappeared, smaller now, a silent guide. Next destination, heart of the Oregon sector, Alliance Protocol. Selrin smiled, touching Dante's shoulder. Looks like we have a course. Looks like it, he said. But first we need to make sure the galaxy understands what we're building. He turned to the open channels. The last fleet isn't an army, it's a promise. Every ship will be commanded by a dual link. None of us rules them all. All of us keep the network alive. If you want to join, choose someone different from you. Trust them. That's the first test. Silence. Then an avalanche of green signals, commitments, requests for coordination. Selrin watched, impressed. They're accepting. Dante exhaled. Truth is hard to manipulate when you can feel it in your skin. The vessel's panels began to transform, not only displaying data, but creating virtual rooms for training and communication. A dozen different species appeared in simultaneous holograms, each bringing memories, songs, ways of seeing the universe. Selrin was moved. It's like we're weaving a new language, made of everything. Dante looked at her with a calm smile. The language of the Guardians. Outside, Maelstrom sealed its core, reorganizing its storms to form a permanent shield. The inner city closed slowly, returning to a latent state, now part of the awakened network. The entire planet became a sanctuary beacon for the future. Selrin lightly touched the portable crystal strapped to her wrist. With this, we can return whenever we want. If we want, Dante said, but I think the road points forward. The primordial vessel lifted, leading the last fleet toward the stratosphere. When they passed through the cocoon of storms, space opened before them, a tapestry of stars, nebulae, and forgotten routes. The mercenary ships and drones that had once been a threat now escorted them, sending data and promises of cooperation. The galaxy had changed. At the center of the bridge, Dante took Selrin's hand. I remember when it was all just sand and crystals on Clerion. He smiled. And now, she finished, smiling too. Now we're redrawing destiny. He tilted his head. Not me. Us. Selrin pressed her forehead to his, as she had in the core. Us. The lumina answered with one last pulse. No longer blue but gold, reflecting the new phase. The tattoos of light reappeared faintly on them both, no longer burning, but thrumming softly like living jewels. It was the sign that the network was anchored in them. On the galactic hologram, dozens of new hearts lit at once, the fruit of the pulse sent by Maelstrom. Pairs forming, species collaborating, ancient alliances reborn. The map looked like a winter sky, suddenly set ablaze with fireworks. Selrin looked at Dante, eyes brimming. It's beautiful. It's only the beginning, he replied. The primordial vessel entered a gentle warp, taking the fleet into blue light. For a moment, before the jump completed, Dante glimpsed something that made him hold his breath. An alien child on a distant world holding a human's hand, both looking up at the sky at the same time. It was like an echo of what they were building. The image vanished with the jump. In the warp tunnel, Selrin rested her head on his shoulder. I never thought my scientific career would end like this. I never thought my life as a pilot would end like this, he said. She laughed softly. I don't think it's over. Dante looked ahead, where the stars stretched into threads. No, it's not. On the panel before them, the avatar of light appeared one last time, now smiling. Initial Guardian confirmed. Network expanding. The new path is yours. The message dissolved, leaving only the route map to the remaining hearts. Selrin looked at Dante. Are we ready? We are. He squeezed her hand. And this time, we're not going alone. The last fleet completed the jump, disappearing into a blue tapestry that was not just space, but promise. A promise of a new kind of power, not weapons but bridges, not domination but link. And at the center of that link, two different beings who chose to trust each other, proving that the galaxy's greatest technological breakthrough was, in the end, connection.